In this next session, we're going to reflect on the story of Tree of Life. And for people who have been here from the beginning, they will recall that when Richard and Kathy would go away, Ken was often our first choice for serving as minister. And Ken had he really lived up to the image of what we had a minister. He had the white hair. He had the great voice. When he was at the microphone and he was giving us that deep voice. On the one hand, truly the glory of the Lord was in our presence. And other times when he was giving that stern look and conveying some of the lessons of the Bible, you could feel the sinners quake and Hades rattle. Let's just shift gears a minute from the biographical to the more spiritual. Having had this long journey of faith and this immersion into it, what do you consider the great joys and the gifts that have come from a life in the ministry?
I've thought about that. I thought about it as we were going through. No matter where, whether it was Germany, the displaced persons camps, or the congregation in Maryland, in Washington, D.C. It's the people. The people. All these different people. And you have the opportunity to relate to them. And they to you. Everybody with a different story. Or slightly different, at least. That was the greatest. Not only, I don't like to use the word pleasure, but that was the greatest good feeling I had about the ministry, was the people. In Europe, it was discovering people I never knew who suffered more than I ever thought people could suffer. And in Washington, at that congregation, it was people who were more understanding than I ever thought people could be. Having this seminarian come in and assume the responsibility of being pastor in their congregation. And I even, in that congregation, had people come to me for baptism. And I said, well, I'm not ordained. I can't baptize. Well, they went to the synod president. And they said, we have this pastor, and we'd like him to baptize our children. There were 4 children in that family. And the bishop said, yes. We will give him extraordinary provision, concurrence to baptize in this one instance. But it wasn't only one instance. It turned out to be more and more and more. And it was as if I were the pastor in that congregation. But that's one of the reasons I say it was the people. The people developed relationships with each other and with me that were unusual, and I could only be grateful.
That raises an interesting question, because we sit here in central Pennsylvania, and we are in relative affluence. We certainly don't face the sorts of hardships that people all over the globe are experiencing and everything. And so you have these displaced persons, and they've lived a life of conflict and hardship and temptation gone awry and all the kinds of things that we find in the Bible. Were they able to perhaps relate to some of the Bible stories and some of the Bible teachings better than people who are viewing it from a zone of comfort?
Oh, I think so. I think measured need can always be seen as people respond. But that doesn't mean that people in areas like ours, which is relatively affluent, really, relatively, nevertheless, people, I think, find ways to respond to other people. And basically, that's the inside story of the Christian faith and the Christian church. People working with people, people helping people, brother helping brother, sister helping sister, parents helping children of all kinds, all across the church. That's the church.
Over the course of your long career, have you seen a change in the manner of worship or the way that people worship? And I'm not asking, people know that the hymn books change and the song selection changes and that sort of thing. But the way people regard church, the way that people practice their faith, what sort of changes have you seen?
The changes, the major changes that I have seen, is I think church, when I was beginning, both as a member and child and so on, and later on, it was more formal in those times. And young people were sort of over here to be instructed, as over against carrying on a fellowship, and the whole congregation gets involved, We would never have thought of a jazz band in my home congregation.
Or a Celtic band or bluegrass.
Or bluegrass or anything like that. That's right. And the youth were there to be instructed. Not in all cases, but generally speaking, the youth were there to be instructed. Here they become a part of the life of the whole people. And we become a community with the youth at the center of it, you see. Those are the major differences, and I think helpful, wonderful differences.
Certainly people in every profession, but I think it's true in the church more so than in many. How gratifying is it to have two generations of ministers following you?
Here I should be very formal and say, oh, it doesn't make any difference. But really, you know that I wouldn't be telling you the truth.
Correct.
It is a wonderful thing to see your own, and then your own's own in the ministry, following you. Of course, Richard had a father for a pastor. I mean, had a pastor for a father. Right? And as our two daughters were growing up, we never thought they were going to go into the ministry. Well, it wasn't until they were in high school, or one of them in high school, that women could be ordained. And when they started being ordained women, we didn't think about our two daughters, because one was already in high school and going to planning on becoming a librarian. And if not that, a librarian assistant. So, Kathy, I'm not sure what she was going to be. But it wasn't until later Kathy was going to become a teacher, and Elizabeth was going to continue to be a librarian assistant, and she was at Gettysburg Seminary. She became they had a position open, and she got it. Well, she came home one weekend and said, Paul, she calls me Paul, Kathy calls me Dad. But she said, Paul, what do you think about my taking a few courses at the seminary? I see these guys coming in and going in and out of classes, and if they can do it, I think I can. I said, if you want to take some courses at the seminary, please do. She did, and she went right on and became a pastor. And then, of course, here, Kathy was still going to become a teacher or finish her schoolwork. Well, she had finished that. But, and she was going to become a teacher after they were settled in their marriage and so on. But then she started saying the same things about she really likes being in the congregation, working in the congregation. And so she and Richard agreed that she might go to seminary and do the necessary work there. And she did. And she came back here, and you people were kind enough and generous enough so that she became a pastor along with Richard. Yep.
Well, we certainly have been the great beneficiaries of the duo deal. So you've described how Kathy and Richard have followed along, become an important part of the ministry themselves. And now we have Andrew.
That's right. Well, we do have Kathy and Richard have decided, along with this congregation, deciding that they're going to stay, that they're here as pastors. And along comes in their family 3 children who are also so much a part of this congregation that they can't get it out of their system. Betsy and Johanna call home and wonder what's going on and so on with people they know. And this is their base, you see. And then, of course, Andrew, who decided that this was not only the base, but he was going to make it his life, you see. And how grateful we can be for that. He was deciding to be all kinds of things when he was in college. No, he wasn't going to be this or that. He was just going to work at things where he could have some say over what he does, and so on. Well, it was, I think, after he had been working at the funeral home, he had time to think during those excursions, a lot of times, many families to meet. And although he doesn't fully agree with me, I say that had a great deal of effect on his future life. And he finally decided that he was going to take a few courses at the seminary. But once he got into seminary, it wasn't going to get out. Well, he finished seminary, and all of a sudden, he gets this call from the bishop and says, "How would you like to be interviewed at St. James?" Here was the largest church in Gettysburg, a church that I served in the intermediate department in their Sunday school when I was going to seminary, not as a pastor. And so he became the pastor there. And he refers now to many times where he was influenced to become a pastor because of his life at this church and what it has meant to him and what it has meant to many families that he saw here. And so he has become a Lutheran pastor. And now the bishop has asked him, I don't know if he would want me to say this, but I'll say it anyway. Not much he can do, for me with me. At 93, his old grandfather can say things. That the bishop has asked him to be a part of the course on training for large congregations. And, well, that's a sign of confidence that the leadership of this church, who found its way to be a leader, may be here.
Well, it occurs to me as you talk about the influence on Andrew that led to his going to the seminary. We have an extraordinary bunch of people from this church who have made this similar decision to go to seminary, and whether it's to become a minister or a deacon or a deaconess.
That's right.
It's so that there's something in the air here that leads people to make that decision, and for some people it's it's midlife change of career. Others are young people just coming out of college.
I don't know of any congregation that has supplied this many people to the seminary as this congregation has. I really don't. Not at the present time or in past times, that a single congregation has had this many people. So
again, it's a testament that what you said about the spirit of the congregation, right, and the commitment of the leadership and the involvement of people who say something needs to be done. I'm willing to do it, and you know what? You can actually count on me to show up.
That's right. That's right. Yes, indeed, because that's true here. And I really don't know of a congregation where that is as true as here. Even the congregations I served were not all that way. The congregation in Redwood City was very responsive, but not necessarily any more so.
Well, when you talk about the Gospels and the influence of Gospels and the importance of the Gospels, certainly a lot of people were following Jesus' admonition to go forth and serve.
And serve, yeah.
But I have to ask you, go back a step, because Kathy in her sermons often references her California roots.
Yeah.
So how did you end up in the land of the movie moguls and the Beach Boys?
Well, we had 3 congregations in California. I just immediately go back to your question. 3 congregations in California. One we developed in Redwood City. Redwood City was the congregation that the place that we were called to develop a congregation by the Pacific Southwest Synod. Ross Heide had been in Europe helping to develop, to put together a program for a film, Answer for Anne. And I happened to be in that film quietly as one of the workers in Germany. And he said to me as he was leaving, "We're going to get you to come to California when you get back and finish seminary." Well, he and I had been in touch a number of times, but he wasn't the president of the synod. So I didn't think too much of it. But we were, I was graduating from seminary in that spring of 52. And, it was about April or so. And I thought, well, Ross said they wanted me in California, but maybe they don't. And so I was looking around at other places, so on, thinking about spots where I might be. One day, one afternoon, at about 1 o'clock, I got a call at the seminary. This was the president of the synod, Beeson, from California. And he said, Ken, Ross Heide said that you might be interested in coming to California. Well, I said, I might be interested. I've been looking at some other places, possibilities. He says, well, I'm going to visit a group of people tonight in Redwood City, California. They want to start a congregation. And I would like to give them your name. Will you accept? And I said, well, Joe and I are going to have to talk about this because Joe is now pregnant. And the baby will be coming about May or June is about the time we would need to be traveling. I don't know if we can say that. But anyway, I said, I'd like to think about it. He said, well, I'll call you back. You think about this, but it's going to be a good place for a congregation to develop. And I said, I'm sure it would be because most places in California are these days. And he said, yes, but we need good people too. So I would like to see you come to this place. Well, I said, we'll have to think about it. He said, I'll call you back. Well, he called back at 4 o'clock and said, I'm going. Have you thought about it? I'm on my way to Redwood City. Have you thought about it? Well, I said, we've thought about it, but we haven't been able to come to a decision in this short a time. There's so many things, especially with a new baby arrival around that time. So he said, well, you give it some thought. I said, I will. Well, he went to this meeting and they issued a call. So I had to say yes or no. It wasn't, I'll think about it. So I said, give us a little time. So we arranged a time when no matter when Liz was going to be born, she would be born in a safe place. So Joe decided to visit her with her parents in her parents' home in Iowa. And I would finish seminary so that we could make the journey from Iowa after the baby was born. Well, the baby was stubborn. Liz didn't arrive in time. I went to Iowa, and I was there, waited for the baby didn't come. Well, I had to get off then to California, and I did. I went to California, was there for about 2 weeks, and Liz was born. So Kathy, or Joe, my wife, made arrangements to come to California from Iowa on the train in a special apartment in the train after I was there. So I met Liz, our first daughter, in the Oakland train station. And finally we were together. But so we developed that congregation. We started with about 29 people were at the first service. And when we left, there were just a few over 1,700 baptized members in the congregation. So that's how things came to be in California.
And you said you served two other
Congregations
there.
Well, the church was always asking me to do something that made it necessary for me to go to New York and Chicago. And after 11 years, I agreed to come to New York to develop committees in all of the synods of the church to search for pastors, and then to work with the young students while they were becoming pastors. And we did that, and I did it really with 33 synods, Canada and the United States, in a little less than a year. And then I was supposed to service these committees, but I didn't think that would be too exciting. So I said, I'd like to go back to the congregation. So I went back to a congregation, and at that time the congregation in Berkeley was open, and I was called there. And served there in that congregation for 4 years or so, but by that time, things were different in that congregation. There was a lot of unrest in Berkeley during those days when I was there.
And more to come.
And more. A lot of unrest there. And I served the congregation for 3 to 4 years. It was during that most difficult time at the university. Oh, there were demonstrations every day. And every now and then, people from the campus ministry would call and say, come to the campus dressed in your clerical collar and just walk around. And so I did. I did those kinds of things. So, and we kept things sort of settled in the congregation where I was. But there were 4 pastors and 4 Lutheran congregations in Berkeley. Well, those 4 congregations couldn't support 4 congregations and 4 pastors. Some of them were small, others were a little larger, and so on. So I had the idea and said to the other pastors, let's make a suggestion to the synod. The 4 of us merge, but keep at least 3 locations. But we're one congregation so that we serve together as one. Not you in this section of the city, and I in the other section, so on. And we'll always be in each other's territory because Berkeley isn't that large. Finally, we talked about it with church councils and so on. We started having more and more programs that cut across all 4. And finally, we merged the 4 congregations. And we all stuck together. And 2 pastors accepted calls to other congregations. 2 pastors did the whole thing. And that's the way the congregation then continued, as one congregation, but in multiple places. And I don't see why that can't happen in all of other places in this church. Because we have places that a few people can't afford to keep up. It doesn't seem too spiritual to have all your money be sunk into an old building someplace, you know? And people need to have other kinds of experiences and so on. So I think we've been, and maybe still are, a little too rigid in the way in which we set up things. That there are possibilities for some diversity. So, and we had it there, and we served Berkeley and part of Oakland and Albany and so on in a way that it hadn't been served before.
So you realize that at the time that your work in starting up at Redwood City gave you some experience when they came up with the notion of what is now Tree of Life Lutheran Church.
Well, maybe so.
So your experience at Redwood City, you didn't realize it at the time, but that was almost a practice round for what you have been able to do in the founding and establishment of Tree of Life Lutheran Church here.
Well, really, I haven't served here and helped to develop the congregation. Actually, Richard and then later Kathy are responsible for all of that. But in getting the place and getting things moving in this area. I was constantly after Howard McCartney, who was the president of the Central Penn Synod around that time, and then, of course, others after him. But I would get after Howard and say, Howard, you've got to establish some congregations in the area, someplace around Harrisburg, or around Lancaster, or there's space for new congregations. And they all said, no, we are pretty well set as an old Central Pennsylvania Synod. So I thought, well, we'll see. Later on, I became the director of the Division for Mission in North America. That meant the development of new congregations all over North America. And really the development of some urban centers and so on that we felt should be put together so the congregations could work with each other better. But I continued to talk to Howard and then later to Edmiston and others, Bishop Edmiston now, and others, about a new congregation someplace in Pennsylvania, in the Harrisburg area. Well, finally, they looked around and they came to a conclusion about someplace in this area, North Harrisburg, or perhaps some other places. But they were interested. So finally, we got people to the point. When I say we, this was the staff person we had in this area. We got them interested in developing a congregation in this area where so many new places were being developed, new sections of the city and so on. Well, we finally said that it has to be someplace on Lingelson. Well, the Synod people and we had a person, a staff person who dealt with this region, would look around, and finally they came up with this site where Tree of Life is now. Or at least someplace near here. Because people this way would then be coming down from the residential areas toward the entrance to the Harrisburg route and so on. Well, and there was a lot of development in this area. They settled on this general space, and it turned out to be this corner, or rather this square here. Well, I said, now's the time for us to get our location person, because we had a pretty large staff at the time, and we had it well organized. We had a Japanese planner, a young Japanese Lutheran pastor. His father had graduated from Gettysburg College in 1923. And this young man graduated from the college, but he decided he wanted to go into the ministry. So he never went back to Japan. He went into the ministry here and was a graduate of Gettysburg Seminary. But he was I had taken planning courses in Japan. And he continued that after seminary. Here, he took a number of courses in planning, but he was a natural planner, really. No matter where we sent him, because we took him on staff. His name was Eiichi Matsushita. Eiichi Matsushita. And he had graduated from the seminary by now. He was helping us find spots to build in these various places, areas. Well, we brought him here. And he came and looked at the whole area, drove around for a day or longer. I forget exactly how long it was. But he drove around and looked at the whole area. And he said, it has to be in this square, the new congregation. And we said, well, why does it have to be at this square? He said, not only at this square, the northwest corner of this square. Don't put it on any of the others. He says, because the traffic will get heavier and heavier coming down this road. And people from all over this area. And then people will be coming from various other places and will sometimes come up this and go back toward Lingelstown and Hershey and so on. Well, he said on the location has to be on the northwest corner of this square. Well, we looked around and we finally bought this corner. And that's when we soon, the people in the synod then chose the pastor, who was pastor, who is now pastor, to become the beginning pastor of this congregation. Yep.
So we've now been in existence for more than 30 years. We've grown. We've had the turnover. We are notable for being very family friendly. And so when you describe the changes in worship, obviously the involvement of young people is something that is central to our activity. As you look at what Tree of Life has become, what brings you the greatest joy? What brings you the greatest amount of satisfaction on seeing how it is?
Well, satisfaction and joy are slightly different, but satisfaction that we, and particularly Matsushita, that we were right in selecting the spot. Because so often, congregations, if on their own, will try to choose the least expensive or something they can afford or they think they can afford. But this site was chosen for a reason. For as many people to see the church and to be drawn to the church as possible. And so it gives me a great deal of satisfaction to know that our division was successful at least one thing, and that is we found the right place and the right location. And then, of course, the satisfaction of seeing this congregation, once it opened, to just keep growing and growing and growing. And when people left for one reason or another, usually it was because of moving away, other people would be here and ready to take their place and not just to take their place, but new people were coming in. And the church school and the vacation church school and all of those entries for children and young people really kept the parents coming. And believe it or not, and I know this as an older person, older people like young congregations. Really, it's an amazing thing. I'm sure if you really got to the roots of why, every now and then you'll find an older couple joining you. And it'll be because they want to be in a younger, growing congregation. It gives sort of life to an expanding church, which means an expanding gospel.
I was thinking back to your description of the California experience, where one of the ways in which Tree of Life has grown is that we've had some local congregations who could no longer support the building that they were in. Those buildings have closed, and a lot of people have decided to come to Tree of Life for the reasons you just described.
Sure, yeah, that's right. And Tree of Life is the kind of exciting, growing congregation that could have been described this way 20 years earlier even. But today, congregations generally are on the decline. But at least as yet, Tree of Life isn't. It's retaining its spirit and so on. Maybe not quite as many young people, but that's an area that a congregation like Tree of Life will want to keep working on.
Yeah, you at one point said you hadn't served here, but the old timers remembered that for a good period of time, when Richard and Kathy were unavailable, you were like number one on the pinch hit list. So you delivered a few sermons here, and memorable sermons too, I might say. So when we're discussing the notion that there needs to be a mission church and everything like that, how did we settle on Tree of Life, and what does that signify?
I really don't know quite how we settled on Tree of Life, except I do know that it was an idea of Richard's, I think. And I don't know if anyone helped him with that idea or not. But the Tree of Life is really a perfect illustration. The name is an illustration of the work and the life of the congregation. Very seldom do you get that. You don't get that even with the names of saints. You know, St. Matthew, St. Mark, St. Luke's, so on. Who was Mark? Who was Luke? Well, you know that they were biblical writers. But what else? How does it relate to this congregation? Specifically, Tree of Life really is an expression of what a congregation chooses to be. There are roots there. There are branches there which spread out to the world, you know. And there are places for refuge under a tree. How many times as a little farm boy did I run under the tree to keep the rain off of me? And all sorts of things, supplying fruit. All of these things are related to a tree. All of these things are related to a congregation. The roots and the branches spread out, and the place of refuge, and the place where fruit is given. All of these are part of a tree's life. And so when we have the name Tree of Life, They're very meaningful.
I've been in a lot of churches and I've seen a lot of things done in stained glass. I don't ever recall anything comparable to
No.
our
No.
Tree of Life there.
No. When you have Tree of Life and you sit and worship, many times as I worship here now, look up at that Tree of Life, really, and am inspired by it. I see the roots go down. It makes me think of some things, some sermons, and all that this can mean to people.